feeling better. I actually just remembered something that I was trying to remember for like a couple hours, and it just like hit me all of a sudden. And I just like my eyes went wide, and I had the camera up ready to like press play once I finished doing what I'm doing on here, and I just like looked at myself and anyway had like a moment. It's hilarious. Write it down before I forget. And that act of remembering, given the encoding of the great emotion, circumstantial kind of emotion, encodes it, it's like it engraves it so that I'm not going to remember or forget again. It makes it so that the remembering stays, it stamps. Because I cared. If I didn't, it doesn't keep the process going and repeat itself. You can do that to control your mind, and that's kind of part of what I remembered. First thing I wanted to say, thanks for the comments. I started to feel better after I made the video, which is strange, of course. Then I ate food and I felt a lot better. Sleep's been wild, and then like a weird event happened with nerves, just weird stuff. Yeah, no need for real attention over at least what I want to say. And so don't worry as well. You shouldn't really worry about anything anyway, because that's not going to do anything but associate that energy. Sorry if I'm speaking too low. It's really not. I mean, it's late, but nobody's going to hear me. I'm going to say two real quick things. Talk about a couple other things. Talk's going to be tomorrow. Talk is with, great, now I'm going to look funny because I can't remember her name. Well, my memory's been acting up along with everything else. So yeah. Patricia Farrington. And of course there's other Patricias, and so I'm like all mixed up. But and so yeah, she's doing interviews and things like that, so, or shows, whatever you want to call them. And you know, I really don't condone anybody in particular, but I'll present myself. And so it doesn't mean that you have to be careful with the certain situations. But thanks for the comments as well, and so don't worry. But that'll be tomorrow. And so a couple videos back I mentioned that I was gonna find the few posts I talked about where they were more kind of serious posts, and could possibly even look them up real quick. There's like a half-butted video, and I did find those where I had made posts but not really like turned them into videos. And it's funny because now it's so far back I don't know where it would be. Great, now I have no idea what I'm talking about because I can't find the link, and all I see is videos. Well, it was like the more in-depth, kind of serious stuff. Might have to pause the video if they're talking. Anyway, that was completely went nowhere. But I'll still get back to that previous, more serious videos that I wanted to make from posts, because they were basically about more in-depth looks at the situation, and I'll get around to that. But it's gonna take. I'm like literally there's like 2 trains now, and they're both running parallel, and it's simultaneous information. But the first thing that I want to say real quick is gonna be a quick video. Is that I said this in I think in one of the previous videos just now, possibly the last one, that desire requires a balance of pain, or more so pleasure, because pleasure comes from desire. If you don't desire it, it's not going to give you pleasure in that sense. And if you figure out how to get pleasure without desire, then you've reached actual, the actual enlightenment, not the perverted version. And that is a neutral or a non-dual pleasure. It doesn't carry a response. I still am tired, by the way. I mean, well, now it's nighttime, so I'm like going up and down. But if it's almost like being like fasting. How like the pleasure from fasting, the opposite of that. Now you had too much goodness from that. Now eat a donut or eat a good meal. That's going to give you pleasure too. So the pleasure from not having something is not the same type of pleasure from desire. It's pleasure from knowledge, basically, awareness increasing, removing that which blocks your awareness. And the way this works with the body is that your perception, or physical perception, your senses tend to block the higher mind. They tend to reroute energy to be devoted towards mundane sensory involvement, and you can't really be both. You can't be high ammo at the same time. Although if you do, then you break all the laws, and not the laws, but all the like boundaries, and then you eventually do that too much or enough. You're no longer a part of this realm. You are, but you're part of everything. And so that shapes everything here. Everything from all the money, the professions, the everything that's going on. And the thing I remembered, which is hilarious, because the way I remembered it, it was like it stuck into my mind. Wonder if that was assisted. Excuse me. Is that consciousness, or more so, awareness, self-awareness, is comprised of, at first, moments of wakefulness. When you come to a cognitive arousal, it's really a cogent. I always mess up that word. Cognizant. Cognizant. Yeah, it is. I got it right. Cogent is a word too. Yeah, that's precision in an argument, which is not. No. And so, but it's kind of the same if you follow the trail. And so, imagine a young child coming to awareness. If you go deep enough, you can find these memories. Children are in a hypnagogic trance. At least the majority of them are. This is similar to what it is believed, at least. And this is also something I was told. However, I have similar, along the same lines, maybe not as pronounced ideas, but that the tribes that haven't really taken to the individuality that comes with what we call modern civilization, where everyone's basically wearing the same clothes, doing the same thing, so on and so forth. They're in a type of hypnagogic trance in the same way, same sense. They don't know that they're aware of who they are. They just are aware. It's a pure awareness without restriction. But in that, defining that restriction, we have that resistance. There's a quote that said, it's on Twitter from Esoteric Exposal, and I wish I knew who said it. And the quote was, it's kind of sexist, but they were pretty sexist back in the day. And anyway, B.O.B. said, you kill for some boneless fries. I don't know what boneless fries are. But the quote was that man knows himself by knowing other men. So basically, in having that boundary between what you are and what you are not, only then do you know what you are. And when you're just here knowing what you are, there's really no knowingness, which is It's paradoxical. Only by introducing the boundary, the lack of continuity, do you gain what is separate, and through that separation, whole and singular and one. And this person makes so many posts. And so that relates to the consciousness, because only once we wake up to realize we were asleep do we realize we're awake. And until that point, we're basically in a type of dream where it's like a lullaby, where it dances around the message, the control, but extremely loud car. But we don't actually know how to formulate what it is that is motivating what is driving us, and what we're expressing, and to express ourselves. And if you think about it logically, linearly, ourselves motivating us to express ourselves, well, that's not really sensible. And that's where that duality kind of paradox comes in, which is where you have the definition, or where you have the restriction, the boundary of what is, there you have the definition of what is. And if you can do that with yourself, you basically become the world, if you will. There's so many posts, I can't find the quote to see who said it, because I'd like to say who said it. I've scrolled probably through 50 Twitter tweets. And yeah, check out Esoteric Exposal on Twitter. You won't be able to say you know everything that they're showing you just in a few minutes of scrolling. It's all esoteric knowledge, and this is what is used to control the population. I can't find that, but and so in that duality, that paradoxical knowingness based upon not knowingness, we find an emergence quality of self-awareness, of consciousness. And at first, there are broken blips, glimpses, like we're taking naps out of the hypnagogic trance and temporarily waking up to constant, continuous awareness, but falling back asleep rather quickly. When we can connect the moments of wakefulness, because we learn how to self-stimulate that act of waking up. Because you imagine, normally when we wake up, it's, if we're awoken, okay, it's by something else. It's by a sound, noise, a sound, a sun, whatever. Or you run out of not run out of, but you gain all you can gain from sleeping, and your body will naturally wake up. The point is, imagine if we're in a place where you can do that forever. And so we have to learn to wake ourselves up. And when the points are connected, the glimpses of wakefulness, that trance that goes to an emergent consciousness and self-awareness becomes a stream of awareness, a stream of consciousness. And from that stream, that's where your personality is born. That's where you begin to shape this aspect of who you are, the mirror, the reflection of yourself, your image in the waters of your mind, basically. And it's just like the monkey trying to grab the moon in the reflection of the water. You can't grab yourself in the reflection of your mind, because you invented it to explain the paradox of being asleep and being awake at the same time, in the same world. And it's because there's a gradient between high awareness and low awareness. It's all one, but it is separate because it operates differently. And it's a mathematical, geometric, frequency-based, pattern-based, all the plethora of modes and methods that come together to create this capacity to emerge from having points of separate data points, and then from those points being able to create whole networks that emerge and become units of wholeness in different points. And at the same time, you could have multiple points that are separately, independent and as well networked and connected as larger wholes, and this expands and expands and expands because the pattern never actually ends. That's the whole point. And it's also because the same process that's cycling is actually, it's kind of like a Rolodex. It's connected to other, nice water by the way, not soda, to other, basically other realms. It's like a Wheel of Fortune that spins, but while that one's spinning with that track that you can see, there's simultaneously an invisible one above it and below it, and they're both spinning in maybe different directions even, and depending on where this one lands, the material one, the other ones will give you different answers. And if you ever align them all in a certain way, the power level increases beyond what either of them are separately. And so what we have here is an emergence that expands beyond the energy of what we have in what we can see. So it's like we get energy from nowhere. It's kind of like a free energy, but instead of getting energy, you get awareness. And the awareness is a presence in the moment. It's literally the same as kind of watching TV or something. If you watch TV, which is not safe for your health, and you know, maybe some movies and stuff, and you go into a trance. The idea is you don't know you're in a low state of awareness. Because you're in a low state of awareness, that's the point. It's reflexive. So I was going to make this short. But that's why I was happy I remembered this, because this was, I used to come up with this conclusion. It's between the individual components and the whole. The parts and portions, or the whole. There's only one whole, which just means all of them. And there's multiple parts, which always means partiality to the whole. The components that lead up to it. You can have that components that lead up go on forever, and you can have the ultimate view expand forever. But in the end, if you will, or the whole, there's a finite set. But those sets can combine. It's like the LEDs. Nice truck again. LEDs little light game where you could plug the LEDs in and make a bunch of different shapes. On the board, you have a limited amount of slots to put in the LEDs, the little pegs that light up. But you can do so many combinations that you can make virtually for our intentions, for our use and intentions, virtually an unlimited amount of combinations. You're never going to sit there and run out of combinations. You can make anything. People make crazy sceneries with these, you know, certain toys like that, or the Etch-a-Sketch. Technically, there's a limited, finite amount of combinations, but we're never going to reach that in any probable, realistic manner. In that sense, though, from a universe perspective, there's, you know, only so many atoms or so many combinations. It's finite. It's limited. There are only so many base, you know, elements or fragments or components or frequencies, harmonics, or mathematical patterns or primes or, you know, something like that. And but they create this universe where it is seemingly infinite. It gives us infinite experience, like the Rolodex of consciousness. And so from that, we're in just a little slice of that. But the reality of it is that it's multiple layers stacked over one another, and that's another term, another way of understanding this. My voice got like progressively louder. Is that it is stacking. It's literally through data stacking that information emerges, where basically the access from these invisible realms that are currently from the physical invisible to us here leak in various ways that the components configure themselves to introduce correspondence between the levels, and there is more here to become aware than there was seemingly before. We didn't add anything. You change the configuration and you get more energy than with the previous configuration. So it's like a puzzle game or something like that. And your brain is doing that. And really it's your energy system. And the brain is the organ that it invented to come up with that. And then there are certain bits of knowledge about how the brain has configurations to restrict that and create an overwhelming sense of excess possibilities and configurations to the point where it looks like a maze and a labyrinth, but it's really not. And so in that sense, the stream of consciousness, when we can tie them together, that is the basis of it. that it's like, imagine if you watch TV, which I hope you don't, or maybe when you watch a movie, because I watched a few movies here and there, maybe a little more here and there, probably not too much anymore though, or as much. Basically, watch yourself, and this is what I mean by multiple layers. And if you can see yourself and you catch yourself slipping into that lull state, who caught yourself and who slipped into it? Were there three of you, one that slipped, one that caught, and then one watched both? You're at multiple layers simultaneously, but you don't know it because you don't have a use for that. But once you learn how to reconfigure the way you observe and your perspective changes or complexifies or expands, then those components are possible, and it's actually as if you're taking a step back and introducing an extra dimensional or extra consciousness layer that you can observe from without interacting, and it's as if there's more of you, of your experience, than just the one singular linear consciousness that is present when we don't have the capacity to self-stimulate, self-initialize wakefulness. This can all be learned by remembering how, as a child, you basically went through these same things. But it's over years and things like that. And when you learn to go within through certain practices or the heat of the moment, emotions are high, food and desires, and you go into gratification, delayed gratification, like Kai said. Check that video on the Facebook. I'll probably make a post on the blog about it. That is the sign, the mark of awareness, of the aware, of the modern man or woman. But it doesn't mean modern, it means enlightened, Christed, which is where if you can choose to be self-aware, you're moving out of autonomy and the mechanistic reactive state of lower consciousness, which is an animal instinctual existence. And those realms, similar to everything else I've been saying, have a reflection in an energetic plane. And those are the lower realms of the energetic spiritual animals. And a person, a human, is not supposed to be in the animal plane. It's the weeping and gnashing of teeth. It would be like going into the jungle and living, after living in a city, which I wouldn't recommend living in a city, but I'd probably recommend living in the jungle in certain situations, because people in the jungle are healthier than the people in the city. But the point is that in that contrast, it's the same in the reflection for the mental realms, or the spiritual realms, where if a person is overtaken and their body flips upside down spiritually, and now their lower energy center, or their head, and they see through their butt basically, or their genitals, and their mouth and their heart and their thinking, aspects are down low, being guided like an animal, okay, then it's backwards. And the person's whole universe is upside down from there on. And they live in an energetic realm that is similarly reversed. And so, in that sense, when consciousness, emergence of self-awareness emerges to the forefront of the motivation for how you interact and observe this reality and yourself, in literally observing the act of observing yourself, breaking it down, what it means to be, in order to define what it is that you're defining. Not anything in particular in specifics, but in the general kind of a vague or a self-referential and partially redundant. There's actually a term for this, which is a self-referential because redundancy is a certain form of self-reference, where basically the action or reason behind what the purpose of something is the definition of how it exists in the first place. It feeds back into itself like a loop. For example, a clock that has the image of the clock, say at 12, okay, midnight, and you look at where the 12 would be, and it has the image of two hands going up and down like 12 midnight. And you look at 3 o'clock, and it has the images of the hands at 3 o'clock. And so instead of the numbers, it's the clock itself. And the whole thing is made of clocks, telling you when it points at 3 o'clock, okay, you get the 3 over there, and it has the, instead of the numbers, it has a 3. So it shows itself. It's like a word that is defined by using the word in the definition. It's redundancy, and there's a study for that. I can't think of the word, and it's kind of weird to find. But it's like a mind game. And that's what consciousness is. Because that's what you're doing. And when you can learn to do that, it leads into more of the same. And that's what I mean by these feedback loops, where eventually it'll introduce layers that weren't explicitly visible or seemingly necessary before, until you get to the point where it's entirely not unnecessary, but it's excess, to the point where you're seeing everything, to the point where you have no way or possibility to use all this information logically. But then it loops back around itself, and it becomes the meaning of why you're there, because it's not necessarily to use the information to do something different, but to become more conscious. So you get consciousness to become more conscious of yourself. You become aware, so you're more aware of yourself. But the point is, when you can learn to self-initiate that, that's when that kind of got off track, but it's still there. That's when that becomes something that it's like a power. It defines it. I don't really know how to describe from there, but that's the point, because there is no way of describing it. Because this goes back to being conscious of being conscious. If you go beyond that in describing what it is you're doing, then you moved out of that state. If you can stay in that state and still actively be doing it, you're stacking layers, and that's where these invisible layers begin to, you're forcing them to express themselves into this plane, and you're overloading this plane, basically. It goes back to what I said a while ago about the sacred pathway, which is basically if you have, it goes from duality, basically just a sine wave line, parabola. Yeah, you think you have up and down, and now higher and lower, whatever it is. It's really polarity of its own nature, meaning it's a redundancy. Up and down is not up and down, but it's basically out and then back into where it started in the first place. The high and low is the same thing. It's not more of something. And then like the opposite is something else. It's literally one thing at a gradient. There's only one thing there, basically, where we see two things and we think it's a sensation that are separated, the hot and the cold or whatever. It's really only one thing there. It's itself being separated by our perspective. But the point of that is, geometrically or visually, graphically, if you map this function, you basically get like a circle. What is the word for? My memory's terrible, but these are things I always forget. A circle. Circle unit, I think. Unit circle. Unit line. Oh man, I'm messing this one up. No, unit circle, yeah. Which is basically the mapping of, say, a turning of a circle in a logarithmic, I think you can say it's a logarithmic, like a progression. And it basically looks like a wave. But the point is, when you get more complex things, you can use this to determine things, begin to graph them. But in the basic sense, that same motion of something going like this, say around a clock, you can map it as something going like this. And it's weird because it's not just that you're mapping it in terms of the values, because that's true too, but literally if you draw it on this piece of paper and trace a dot piece of, a thumbtack around the end of a circle, a small hula hoop or ring or something, And on a piece of paper, it draws a wave line out like that. And so it's mathematically, numerically matching the progression on the, like a numerical, basically a circle, as well as the physical action that it's doing. The math and the action are the same thing. It's one. When you get that symmetry, that's defining itself as itself. The unit circle is the same thing as a clock that says what time it is by showing what a clock looks like when it's that time. Because when you see the wave doing that, that's showing what the circle is doing when it's doing that. It's just showing it. And your consciousness is doing that. So the point is, when you have one at that level, that's the base level. They're made of dualities from high and low. It's really one thing. When you expand that, you have one line doing this, and then that line begins to go up and down. And you have a curvy line now making a curvy line. And then you zoom out again, and then now you have 3 layers of curvy lines where there's a small curvy line making a curvy line, and then that little pattern right there is making a curvy line up and down, up and down. The whole point is that that expands, and it can go out in multiple layers. The point is, 9 is the maximum you need to define the universe. Any more than that, you're repeating proportionally. And you max out proportions when you can get 9 of those layers in one. It's like folding a piece of paper more than 7 times. That's like a random way to describe it. But when you can do that in your head with layers of becoming cognizant of your own awareness, that's where this event occurs, this foaming, effervescent, bubbling, coming to the surface of awareness, and wakefulness is formed. And you become the forefront of that wakefulness rather than the result of it. You become the initiator of it and the result of it. You make it yourself. You become the creator. And so that's the stream of consciousness. That was 5 minutes wrapped up in 31 minutes. I just want to say I thank for the comments. I haven't really been able to respond to them. I will soon. And I can't tell you about what is coming. Desire does require a balance of pain. And the never-ending story is real, and the fall of man is real, and what goes up must come down. So, what goes down must come up. And some say it was 2 billion years. On the higher plane, only 33 years will be passed by the time we finish this whole cycle. Training sims, the fallen, Jerusalem, the great rift chasm of darkness, the illusory fallen timelines, the black goo, the hunters and the watchers, the doppelgangers, the beginning of time, stopping time, restarting time, the hall of memories, entering hell. There's so much that happened in this cycle of history that we'll talk about it. All right, thank you. And to add, the waves going, that's your consciousness. You don't have to make the circle turn and the wave therefore go. That's time. It's happening automatically. What you do is put the thumbtack in the ring as it's turning so that you begin to draw the line as the ball rolls, and it draws the line as it goes up and around. And you have to sit there and hold your consciousness as the layers progress, and that act of holding is stretching some type of fabric. And the more you do that, and the more pull, the more weight you get behind that, the more impact, the more there's a pronounced change or shift in your awareness, and eventually that stacking occurs, and you have multiple layers beginning to coincide in one, and where the layers begin to stack, and you have one proportional set, and then another, basically the line going this way, and then the line going that way, and then the whole thing doing this. It's literally like the never-ending story. There was a video on that I might post, but that's the secret. That's the never-ending stories, layers of correspondence interacting across planes of perception, of abstract reference relative to one another, dependent on your perspective, your ability to differentiate and collude, in essence, to bring a kind of a relative order between the layers, because otherwise, if nobody does it, then they're there, but it doesn't do anything, at least not in this plane. You know, it doesn't do anything here now. So you do it, you make it, you bring it here by seeing it and becoming it in that sense. And that's just what I wanted to add to it. The circle's already going. All you have to do is put the thumbtack in and draw that line and hold, if you will. You're putting like a hold somewhere like in the past, because it begins to go forward, and that stretches the stream of consciousness out. Note that that kind of looks like a snake, the way it moves through the sand, if you will, in the sky in certain situations. So we'll talk more on that. And I meant to say collide in that last part, but collude works as well. You look up the meaning, or if you know the meaning, it's that act is the sacred secret coming together of what is actually happening. It's the secret of what this actually is. Just, you know, think about it.